The slap came so fast I couldn't even react. My glasses flew off, shattering on the polished ballroom floor as 130 guests stared in stunned silence. My cheek burned, but the ache in my chest was far worse. Juliet, my daughter-in-law, had just slapped me on her wedding day because I refused to hand over the keys to my apartment. "That's what you get for being so selfish," she yelled at me in front of everyone. "A woman your age doesn't need so much space." The silence afterward was deafening. No one moved to help me as I crouched down, trembling, to pick up the fragments of my glasses. Some guests averted their eyes, uncomfortable. Others whispered, but absolutely no one dared to defend the humiliated mother. My son Ethan stood frozen, his gaze locked on the floor as if I had become invisible. "You're not welcome here anymore," Juliet continued, smoothing her flawless wedding gown. "Ethan and I need our privacy to start our new life. Your apartment would be perfect for us while we shop for something better." Her words were venomous. For months, I had endured her condescending remarks about my old clothes, my aged car, my modest life. But this crossed a line that should never have been touched. I rose slowly, feeling every eye on me like blades. Tears streamed down my face, yet something inside me had shifted permanently. That slap wasn't just physical, it was the final straw. For years, I had stayed quiet, living with humility and discretion. I had secrets no one, not even my own son, could imagine. Memories from the past months began to flood my mind as I walked toward the exit. I remembered Juliet's first visit to my apartment 2 years ago. Her face fell when she saw my modest home, the worn furniture, the tiny kitchen. "Seriously, this is where Ethan's mom lives?" she asked him, her voice just loud enough for me to hear. From that moment, every visit became a silent torture. "Aurora, you should move somewhere smaller," she told me 3 months ago during a family dinner. "At your age, you can't maintain such a big apartment. Besides, Ethan and I are thinking of having kids soon. We'll need more space." Her fake smile fooled no one except my son, who seemed to lose all personality whenever she spoke. Like a puppet on a string, the humiliations escalated gradually. First, my clothes. "Aurora, don't you have anything more modern to wear?" Then, my car. "That car is so old, it's dangerous for you to drive that." Next, my part-time job at the local flower shop. "I don't understand why a woman your age is still working instead of relaxing." Each comment was a tiny dagger piercing my self-esteem. My name is Aurora Hughes. I am 68 years old, and all my life I have chosen discretion over ostentation. I work at a small flower shop 3 days a week. I drive a 10-year-old car. I shop at discount stores. To outsiders, especially to Juliet, I am merely a middle-class widow living on a fixed income. But that image is exactly what I carefully cultivated for decades. No one looking at me with pity knew my life had been completely different before my husband passed. My husband, Robert, was not the ordinary office worker everyone believed. We chose to live modestly, to hide our true wealth, to safeguard our family's privacy, a decision that now seemed prophetic. As I walked out of the ballroom, the guests' murmurs followed me like a toxic fog. "Poor thing. She looks so fragile," whispered Juliet's aunt. "The bride is right." "That woman can't take care of herself anymore," added Ethan's cousin. "She should be in a retirement home, not living alone," another guest said with feigned compassion. Each word poured acid onto fresh wounds. The ballroom's cold air sharply contrasted the suffocating heat burning inside my chest. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my cell phone inside my worn black purse. I'd used that purse for 5 years, not because I couldn't afford another, but because I valued practicality over appearance. A concept Juliet would never understand. I dialed a number I knew by heart. One I hadn't called in over a year. I had hoped I'd never have to. "Carlos, it's Aurora. I need you to come to the Royal Oaks Ballroom immediately." "Yes, right now. Bring the documents we discussed." It's time they learned the truth. My voice shook, but underneath it was a firmness I hadn't felt in years. "Are you sure, Mrs. Hughes?" Carlos asked, his tone professional yet uneasy. "Once we do this, there's no turning back." I looked back at the ballroom one last time. Through the glass doors, I could see Juliet laughing among her friends, likely bragging about how she'd finally put her useless mother-in-law in her place. Ethan stood beside her, smiling weakly. No trace of guilt or shame in his expression. "Completely sure," I said. 30 minutes. Carlos. No more. I ended the call and walked toward my car with steady steps. For the first time in years, I was done pretending. The mask I'd worn to protect my family was coming off. They were finally going to meet the real Aurora Hughes. And when that happened, when truth shattered their perfect illusions, they would understand what regret truly meant. The parking lot was empty and still, bathed in the glow of streetlights that cast long shadows between the cars. I sat in my old sedan, waiting. 30 minutes for their lives to change forever. 30 minutes for them to realize they had made the worst mistake of their lives by humiliating the woman who had quietly taken care of them more than they could ever imagine. As I waited, memories came flooding back, unstoppable, sharp, and cold. It had all begun 2.5 years earlier. When Ethan had shown up at my door with that nervous smile I remembered from his childhood. "Mom, I want you to meet someone very special," he'd said. And there she was, Juliet. Perfectly styled hair, designer clothes, and a smile that never reached her eyes. From the first moment I sensed something off. The way she scanned my apartment, evaluating every corner with polite disdain, told me everything I needed to know. "How cozy," she murmured, eyeing my secondhand furniture and faded curtains. Her tone betrayed her words. Ethan, blinded by what he thought was love, didn't notice. That first dinner was a silent disaster. Juliet barely touched the food I had carefully prepared, claiming she was watching her figure. When I tried to make conversation, she dodged my questions about her family, but not before asking about my finances with false curiosity. "And how do you manage on a widow's pension, Aurora? It must be hard to get by on so little money," she said sweetly, masking her calculation. What she didn't realize was that I had been observing her just as closely. Over the next few months, I noticed the patterns. Every visit brought another innocent remark about how outdated everything was, how I deserved something better in my golden years. But her eyes always lingered on what really mattered: the prime location of my building, the panoramic view from my balcony, the generous size of the rooms. Then, one afternoon while Ethan was in the bathroom, I heard her whispering in my kitchen. "Yes, Mom," she said on the phone. "His mom's apartment is in a super expensive area. If I can convince her to move to a smaller place, we could stay here until we get our own." She's so naive. She'd probably even thank us for helping her with the transition. Her words sliced through me like a blade. Still, when she walked back into the living room, I smiled, pretending I hadn't heard a thing. From that moment forward, every interaction with Juliet became a carefully staged performance. She played the concerned daughter-in-law, feigning worry about her mother-in-law's well-being, while I played the fragile, vulnerable widow in need of guidance. Inside, however, I was quietly observing, collecting information, understanding her true intentions. It was a chess game where both of us thought we held the advantage. The following months brought a steady escalation in her First came subtle suggestions. "Aurora, I've seen some lovely apartments for people your age with all-inclusive services and no maintenance worries." Then, the pressures became more direct. "You can't keep living alone at your age. It's dangerous. What if you fall and no one finds out for days?" Each argument was meticulously crafted to make me feel helpless and incapable. Ethan, my own son, began echoing her words like a trained parrot. "Mom, Juliet is right. Maybe it would be better to consider a smaller, more manageable place." Watching him transform into her puppet was more painful than any insult she had ever thrown at me. The son I had raised with love and sacrifice now saw me as an obstacle to his happiness. After their engagement announcement, the psychological campaign intensified. Visits became more frequent and tense. Juliet arrived with real estate magazines and brochures for senior communities. "I'm just exploring options for you, Aurora. I want to make sure you have the best quality of life possible," she'd say, spreading the materials on my coffee table like a corporate negotiation, but I had been conducting my own research. One afternoon, while they were out running wedding errands, I called an old friend in real estate. "Amelia, I need you to investigate something for me. There's a couple interested in my apartment, and I want to know their true financial situation," I instructed. What I discovered chilled me. Juliet and Ethan were drowning in debt. Their wedding alone cost over $50,000, financed entirely on credit cards and loans. The apartment they rented was on the verge of eviction. Their luxury cars, all financed beyond their means. Their lifestyle was a fragile facade propped up by debt. Everything suddenly made sense: the rush to marry, the insistence I move, the constant remarks about my finances. This wasn't love, it was survival. A desperate attempt to solve their financial problems using my apart. Her words no longer carried the veneer of concern. They were commands disguised as favors. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Carlos, my financial advisor, and the only man I had trusted completely since Robert's death. "Carlos, I need you to prepare some documents. I may soon have to reveal information I've kept hidden for years." His tone became immediately serious. "Mrs. Hughes, are you sure this is the right time?" He had handled my affairs for over a decade and spoke with the wisdom of experience. Once this information went public, there would be no turning back. The consequences could shatter family relationships, but I had already made up my mind. The family I had tried to protect through silence had chosen betrayal. Now, sitting in my car in the ballroom parking lot, waiting for Carlos with the documents that would change everything, I knew the moment of truth had arrived. 25 more minutes, and Juliet, Ethan, and every guest who had looked at me with pity would discover who Aurora Hughes truly was. 25 minutes until their perfect worlds built on lies and greed crumbled like sandcastles. The night breeze rustled the trees surrounding the lot, casting dancing shadows under the streetlights. Poetic in a way that, on such a beautiful evening, so many illusions were about to die. 20 minutes had passed since my call. Every second dragged. From my car, I saw the golden glow of the ballroom, heard the cheerful music and laughter spilling through open windows. Soon, that celebration would turn into a nightmare for its main players. I closed my eyes, letting the painful memories of recent months flood my mind. I needed to recall why I had reached this point of no return. The most humiliating moment had come just 2 weeks before the wedding, during what Juliet called an important family meeting. She had arrived at my apartment not alone, but with Ethan and her parents, a perfectly orchestrated ambush. Aurora, we want to talk to you about your future, Juliet's mother began, her gaze sharp, dismissive. As if I were an insect, we believe it's time you make responsible decisions about your life. Her father, a dada, burly man, scanning my apartment like a property appraiser. At your age, living alone in such a large place isn't just unnecessary, it's dangerous. What if you have a medical emergency and no one finds out for days? Their words were rehearsed, polished, too perfect to be spontaneous. Ethan stayed silent, nodding occasionally like a puppet trained to agree. Watching him there, sitting with a family that treated me as an obstacle, felt like witnessing the son I had raised die. Mom, he finally said, in a voice I no longer recognized. They're right, Juliet, and I think it would be better if you moved to a place more appropriate for your age. Appropriate for my age, I repeated, anger boiling inside me. And who decided what was appropriate? You? Juliet's mother exchanged a knowing glance with her husband, as if my words confirmed a prearranged plan. Aurora, we understand this is difficult, but you must think about what's best for Ethan and Juliet, they said in unison. What's best for them? I murmured, beginning to grasp the full scope of the conspiracy woven behind my back. And I suppose my apartment would be perfect for them to start their married life, right? The awkward silence that followed was all the confirmation I needed. They had planned every detail of this conversation, every argument, every psychological pressure. Juliet seized control, unleashing her full arsenal of manipulation. Aurora, it's not just about the apartment, it's about your well-being. We've done research and found a wonderful residence for people your age. It has 24-hour medical services, social activities, prepared meals. You could make friends who understand what you're going through. Her fake smile made me physically recoil. What I'm going through? I asked, feigning confusion. And what exactly do you think I'm going through, Juliet? She glanced at Ethan for reinforcement before replying. Well, loneliness, financial uncertainty, the fear of not being able to take care of yourself. It's normal at your age, Aurora. You don't have to be ashamed of needing help. The audacity of this 20-8-year-old lecturing me on what was normal at my age left me momentarily speechless. But then I saw something in her eyes that chilled me, the absolute certainty that she had a right to my life, my home, my decisions. To her, I was no longer a person with autonomy, but an obstacle to be removed with minimal resistance. We've run the numbers, Juliet's father continued, pulling out a folder clearly prepared in advance. The cost of the residence would be approximately $2,500 a month. With the sale of your apartment, you'd have enough money to cover it for many years, and there would still be some left over too. Well, to help Ethan and Juliet with their initial marriage expenses, there it was, the naked raw truth. It wasn't about my safety or well-being, it was about money. About converting my home into cash to finance their unsustainable lifestyle. And if I refuse? I asked, already knowing the answer. Aurora, Ethan said, his voice eerily rehearsed. We hope it won't be necessary to take more drastic measures. But if your mental health deteriorates to the point that you can't make rational decisions, the implicit threat was unmistakable. If I didn't comply voluntarily, they would pursue legal means to declare me incompetent. They had researched, planned, and prepared to take everything I owned by force if needed. My own son, the boy I had raised with love, sat there, allowing strangers to threaten his mother that night after they left and I had firmly refused. I cried for the first time in years, not from sadness, but for the definitive death of the illusions I had held about my family. I called Carlos immediately. I need you to investigate something urgently, I told him through tears. I want to know the exact financial situation for my son and his fiancée. Everything. Debts, income, liabilities, everything. The results were devastating. Ethan earned $45,000 annually as a sales manager, but carried over $80,000 in credit card debt. Juliet worked part-time as an image consultant, making maybe $4,000 a year, yet spent as if she earned an executive salary. Together they owed over $120,000, excluding wedding loans. The apartment they rented for $2,000 a month was 3 months behind. The cars they drove consumed 60% of their combined income in payments. Their main credit card was maxed, and they had started using cash advances to cover other debts. They were in financial freefall land. My apartment was their only lifeline. But Carlos's report held something even more crushing. For 6 months, Ethan had been contacting banks and insurance companies about loans against his elderly mother's property. He had been investigating legal procedures to gain financial power of attorney over seniors. My own son had been planning my systematic dispossession for months. The most painful revelation came at the end. According to a private investigator, Carlos had hired Juliet had been telling friends she had sacrificed herself by getting engaged to an older, less attractive man because his mother had valuable properties and no competitive heirs. Marrying Ethan wasn't about love, it was a strategic investment in my estate. That revelation was the final straw. For weeks I had considered revealing my true financial situation, hoping shock might make them reconsider. But after reading the report, I understood it wasn't about money or desperation. It was pure, calculated greed that had corrupted my son beyond recognition. The days leading to the wedding had been torture. Every call from Ethan brought pressure to reconsider. Every visit from Juliet came with venomous remarks about my stubbornness and selfishness. They treated me as if I were already a senile old woman, irrelevant and powerless. The night before the wedding, Ethan made his final attempt. "Mom, tomorrow is the most important day of my life. Please don't ruin it by being difficult. Juliet just wants what's best for all of us." His words confirmed what my heart already knew. I had lost my son forever. The man marrying Juliet the next day was no longer the boy I had raised with love and sacrifice. Sitting in my car, waiting for Carlos, I understood. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about justice. About showing them the consequences of their actions. About teaching them some lines should never be crossed. 15 more minutes. Everything was about to change. My hands trembled as I dialed Joseph, my neighbor next door, a 70-year-old man who had silently observed the tense visits of the past few months. "Joseph, it's Aurora. I need a very important favor," I said, my voice shaking. "Could you go to my apartment and bring the brown folder from the second drawer of my desk?" "Yes, right now? It's urgent." Joseph had been like a brother since Robert's passing, and I trusted him completely. I remembered our conversation just a week earlier. From his balcony, he had seen Juliet arrive with a real estate appraiser, without informing me Aurora. "That girl brought a man with a briefcase who was measuring your apartment from the outside. When they saw me, they left quickly." "I don't like what's happening at all," he had said, his voice concerned. Joseph had been the first to notice the subtle changes in Ethan over the past months. "Your son doesn't greet me like he used to. He used to stay and chat when he came to visit. Now he rushes in and out as if he's ashamed of something." His words confirmed what I had already felt. I had lost my son long before the slap at the ballroom. The folder I requested contained documents no one in my family had ever seen. Bank certificates, property titles, investment records that Robert and I had safeguarded for decades. Evidence that the modest widow everyone pitied was actually a woman with the power to change lives with a single decision. 10 minutes later, Joseph appeared in the parking lot. The folder in his hands. "Aurora, what's going on? You look very upset," he asked as he handed me the documents. "It has to do with Ethan's wedding," I explained briefly. His face hardened with every detail. "That woman is a viper," he muttered. "I always knew it." "Joseph, in a few minutes, a man named Carlos will arrive. When you see him, tell him I'm waiting here. And after tonight, many things are going to change. I want you to know you've always been like family to me." His eyes filled with tears as he nodded. "You're family to me, too, Aurora. Do what you have to do." As Joseph returned to the building, I opened the folder and began reviewing documents I hadn't seen in months. The first, a bank statement showing an investment account with $5,400,000. The second, a property title for a downtown office building generating $50,000 monthly rent. The third, the deed to a beach house I had bought 10 years ago as an investment. Robert had been a genius at investments. What started as a small import business became a silent empire. Together we had chosen modest living to protect our privacy and family security. Visible wealth attracts problems. Robert used to say, "Invisible wealth gives you power." I had never imagined I would wield that power against my own son. Each document represented decades of careful planning. The flower shop I worked at 3 days a week wasn't for money. It kept me active, engaged with the community. The old car I drove wasn't due to financial limits. It was a deliberate choice. Ostentation invites danger. My apartment, the one Juliet coveted, was actually the least valuable property in my portfolio. I hadn't purchased it for financial gain, but for its memories. It was where Robert and I had spent our final years together, planned our future. and where he had passed in my arms after his courageous battle with cancer. But there was something else in that folder that would change everything for Ethan and Juliet. For the past 3 years since my son's financial troubles had begun, I had been secretly covering many of his debts. The credit card payments he assumed came from work bonuses were actually coming from my account. The discounted rent he bragged about was funded by me each month. Without Ethan knowing, I had been subsidizing his reckless lifestyle for years. His luxurious apartment, the car he drove, even portions of the wedding happening that very moment had been financed by my silent support. I had believed I was helping him navigate a rough patch, unaware I was enabling the transformation of a son I no longer recognized. Bank records, detailed monthly transfers totaling $4,500 money he believed came from bonuses or tax refunds. But in reality, it was his mother desperately shielding him from the consequences of his actions. The irony was suffocating. While Juliet belittled me as an economic burden to their future marriage, I was the only reason they could afford it. While they schemed to seize my apartment, I had been quietly sustaining their lives. I closed the folder and glanced toward the ballroom. Lights still shone. Music still played. Guests still celebrated. In less than 5 minutes, Carlos would arrive with the final documents I needed. In less than 5 minutes, I would sever every financial lifeline I had maintained for a son who had betrayed me. This was not revenge. It was justice. A lesson that actions have consequences, that greed carries a price, that family cannot be traded for convenience. I had protected Ethan for too long, and that protection had corrupted him. Headlights cut through the night, illuminating the parking lot. Carlos had arrived, punctual, carrying the documents that would change everything. I stepped out of my car, each stride taking me farther from the Aurora I had been, and closer to the woman I needed to become. "Mrs. Hughes," Carlos said, holding a legal brief under his arm. "Are you completely sure? Once we proceed, there will be no undoing what is about to happen." I looked once more at the ballroom, where my son and his new wife were likely still celebrating their triumph over the useless old woman they had humiliated. "I have never been more certain, Carlos. It's time for them to meet the real Aurora Hughes." Carlos opened his folder beneath the parking lot light, displaying the documents with his trademark precision. "Mrs. Hughes, here is the order for the immediate suspension of all bank transfers you have been making in Ethan Hughes's name," he said, pointing to the first paper. "Also, the notice of cancellation for the lease agreement you confidentially guaranteed. The landlord will receive this tomorrow morning." I took the papers with hands that trembled yet remained resolute. Each document represented a thread I had painstakingly woven for years to protect my son. And now, one by one, I was cutting those threads in the payment for the ballroom. I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Cancelled," Carlos confirmed. "The deposit you guaranteed will be withdrawn tonight. They will have until tomorrow to find an alternative form of payment." The magnitude of what I was about to do hit me like a cold wave. For 3 years, I had been the invisible safety net keeping Ethan and Juliet's lives afloat. The apartment they lived in, the car he drove, even the wedding happening at that very moment, every detail had been made possible by my secret support. And now, in a single night, I was going to withdraw it all permanently. "Carlos, I want you to understand something," I said, signing each document with a determination I hadn't felt in years. "This is not cruelty or revenge. This is the only way for them to learn the real value of things. I protected them for too long, and that protection corrupted them into people I don't recognize." "I understand perfectly, Mrs. Hughes," Carlos replied, respect deep in his voice. "In my 30 years as a financial advisor, I have seen families destroyed by greed and ingratitude. What you are doing requires more courage than most possess." His words gave me the final strength to take the last step. We walked toward the ballroom entrance together, my heart pounding not from nervousness, but a strange mix of grief for what I had lost and anticipation for what I was about to reclaim. My dignity, my self-respect, my right to be treated as a human being, not a resource. The music stopped abruptly as we entered. 130 pairs of eyes turned toward us. Confusion rippled across the guests' faces. Some recognized Carlos immediately. His presence usually heralded serious matters for prominent families. Juliet reacted first. "What are you doing here, Aurora?" she shouted from the center of the dance floor, posing for photos with Ethan. "You already left once. Wasn't that enough drama for one night?" Her voice carried arrogance, but beneath it, a hint of nervousness betrayed her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carlos said, clear and professional, "I apologize for interrupting the celebration, but I have urgent legal matters to discuss with Mr. Ethan Hughes and Mrs. Juliet Dawson." The silence was so profound you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Some guests pulled out phones. Sensing something extraordinary was about to unfold, Ethan approached slowly, pale eyes wide with confusion. "What's going on here, Mom?" His voice had lost the confidence he'd wielded minutes before when humiliating me. Who is this man, and why is he talking about legal matters? His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie, a nervous gesture he had carried since childhood. "Ethan," I said, firmer than I had spoken in months, "this is Carlos Jones, my financial and legal advisor. He has come to deliver documents that I think you will find very enlightening." Carlos opened his folder and removed the first document. "Mr. Ethan Hughes, you are hereby notified that the financial guarantee your mother provided for your lease agreement has been immediately canceled. Your landlord will be notified tomorrow morning. You have 30 days to find a new guarantor or vacate the property." All color drained from Ethan's face. "Financial guarantee," he murmured, staring at me, comprehension and horror beginning to settle in. "Mom, what is he talking about?" I could see part of him already knew. For years he had suspected his financial luck wasn't entirely natural, but had avoided asking questions that might yield uncomfortable truths. Also, Carlos continued relentlessly, "The monthly transfers of $4,500 that your mother has been making to your personal accounts are permanently suspended. This includes payments for credit cards, car insurance, and various other expenses you believed were covered by other sources." Juliet gasped, the sound echoing through the ballroom. "That's impossible," she screamed, running toward us, her wedding dress trailing behind her. "Ethan doesn't have a rich mother. Look at her life, her clothes, her car. She's an old woman living on a miserable pension." Her hysteria drew murmurs from the guests, a mix of shock and curiosity spreading like wildfire. Finally, Carlos said, taking the last document from his folder, "The guaranteed payment for this celebration has also been canceled. Ballroom management may demand full payment before guests leave tonight." The words hit like a bomb. Some guests shifted nervously toward the exits. Ethan's realization struck him like a hammer. He muttered, eyes wide, unable to process. "You've been, all this time, paying for everything." His voice broke on the last word. For a fleeting moment I saw the small boy he had once been, vulnerable, confused, human. "For 3 years, Ethan," I said, my voice calm despite the storm inside me. 3 years I thought I was helping you through a difficult time. 3 years I hoped you'd recover, become the man I raised. 3 years I believed you'd remember the values I taught you." Juliet began pacing in circles, clutching her head in desperation. "This can't be happening. This can't be real," she screamed, while guests watched with a mix of horror and fascination. "You call me a poor old woman? You see the flower shop I work at, my 10-year-old car, and assume I have nothing." "Appearances are deceiving, Juliet," I said, my voice steady. "Decades of careful performance unraveling. For years, your mother-in-law and I chose simplicity because visible wealth attracts problems. We were right. The problems just came from the last place we expected." The ballroom was silent. Music had stopped completely. Only the newlyweds' agitated breathing and murmurs of realization filled the space. Some guests instinctively recorded the moment, sensing this was history in the making. "Mom," Ethan said, voice breaking, "there has to be some way to fix this, the wedding, the guests, everything." I could see it in his eyes, comprehension, shock, and the understanding that he hadn't just lost money or financial support. He had lost Meetha, mother who had loved him unconditionally for 35 years. "The only way to fix this, Ethan," I replied, "was not to break it in the first place." The silence was deafening. 130 guests held their breath. Juliet froze for the first time all night, her eyes darting between Carlos, the documents, and me, searching for a crack in the collapsing reality. Ethan's expression was etched in my memory. Shock, belated understanding, absolute horror. "Mrs. Hughes," Carlos said, voice carrying through the room, "would you like me to proceed with reading the full financial details?" His question hung over the newlyweds like a sword. Guests leaned closer, captivated by the unfolding drama. "Please, Carlos," I replied, my serenity unnerving even myself. "I think everyone deserves to know the full truth." Juliet tried to interrupt with a desperate shriek, but Carlos raised a hand, silencing her like a conductor commanding an orchestra. He consulted his documents with meticulous precision. Over the last 36 months, Carlos began, "Mrs. Aurora Hughes has transferred a total of $162,000 to cover the living expenses of her son, Ethan Hughes, and his fiancée. This includes $48,000 for rent, $44,000 for credit card payments, $18,000 for vehicle insurance, and $22,000 for miscellaneous expenses." A collective murmur swept through the ballroom. Eyes widened. Phones were pulled out. Calculators appeared in palms as guests tried to verify the staggering. "You didn't know?" I asked, voice rising for the first time. "You didn't know you were orchestrating a family ambush to pressure me into selling my home? You didn't know you brought a real estate appraiser without my knowledge? You didn't know you were investigating ways to declare me incompetent?" With each accusation, Ethan shrank inward, guilt and fear overtaking him. Carlos seized the moment, pulling another document from his folder. "Mr. Hughes," he said, voice firm, "your mother has also amended her will. All assets previously designated for you have been redirected to charities dedicated to protecting seniors from family abuse." The words hit like a bomb. Juliet staggered backward as if struck. Her composure shattered completely. "You can't do that. We're your family. Ethan is your only son. You can't disinherit him over a stupid fight." "A stupid fight?" I repeated, letting it hang in the tense air. "Is that how you describe a family conspiracy to strip an old woman of her home? Is that how you justify slapping your husband's mother on her own wedding day?" The ballroom fell into stunned silence. 130 pairs of eyes fixed on us, capturing every word, every expression. Tonight, the truth had finally found its stage. My voice had turned icy, sharp enough to make several guests flinch. Juliet's father, who had remained silent during the entire confrontation, finally stepped forward, his expression a mask of poorly concealed panic. "Mrs. Hughes," he began, his tone faltering, "I think we're all a little upset by the emotions of the day. Perhaps we could discuss this in private when things have calmed down." He sounded like a man who had just realized he had bet on the wrong horse. "There's nothing to discuss in private," I replied, my voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation. "Everything I have to say has been said here, in front of the very people who witnessed my humiliation. You chose to make this public, so my response will be public." The guests shifted in their seats, their heads darting between us as though watching a tense match point. Completely absorbed in every exchange, Carlos snapped his folder shut. The sound ringing through the ballroom like a judge's gavel. "Mrs. Hughes, all documents have been delivered and explained. The legal effects take place immediately," he stated, turning to Ethan and Juliet with the calm precision of a professional but with an unmistakable hint of satisfaction. "I suggest you contact your own legal and financial advisors immediately." Juliet's composure crumbled. She literally sank into a nearby chair, her sobs uncontrolled, echoing through the stunned room. Everything is ruined," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Everything we planned, everything we worked for, it's all destroyed." Her wedding dress, once pristine, now clung in damp folds, wrinkled and stained with her tears. "No," I said, approaching her for the first time since the slap. My voice was quiet but carried steel beneath the surface. "What's destroyed isn't the wedding. What's destroyed are the lies, the greed, and the lack of respect. What's destroyed is the illusion that you can treat people like objects and expect no consequences." I stopped directly in front of her, forcing her gaze upward. "This," I said slowly, letting the weight of my words sink in, "is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." Ethan stepped toward her, a trembling hand landing on her shoulder. "Juliet, we have to find a way to fix this. There has to be something we can do." But even as he spoke, I saw the flicker of comprehension in his eyes. Deep down, he already knew it was too late. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. "There is a way to fix this, Ethan," I said, looking him directly in the eyes for the first time in months without the shadow of hurt I had carried for so long. "You can learn from this. You can grow from this. You can become the people I hoped you would be before greed corrupted you." My voice softened just slightly. After all, he was still my son, but that growth would have to happen without my financial support, without my apartment, and without any inheritance. "You'll have to face life the hard way, just like everyone else." The ballroom held its breath. Absolute silence wrapped around every guest, every person present realizing they were witnessing the definitive end of a family relationship. Carlos and I began to walk toward the exit, our steps steady and purposeful, leaving behind a room filled with shock, whispers, and the crumbling of a perfect facade. As we neared the door, a small voice stopped me. "Aurora." It was Lucy, Ethan's younger sister. Her face streaked with tears, eyes wide with horror. She ran toward me, her voice trembling. "Aunt Aurora, I didn't know. I swear. Ethan never told me what they were planning. Lucy had always been the one I trusted. My niece, who had never let greed or pride cloud her heart. She had maintained a genuine loving bond with me even after Ethan had drifted away. "If I had known what they intended," she said, her voice breaking, "I would have stopped them." I stopped and looked at her. Seeing the honesty in her eyes, the same honesty I remembered from when she was a little girl. "I know. Lucy," I said softly, lifting a hand to her cheek. "You have always been different. You never saw people as opportunities or resources to exploit." Her tears fell harder as she nodded, devastated by her brother's betrayal. "But why didn't you tell us about the money?" she asked, confusion and hurt in her voice. "Why did you keep all of this a secret for so many years?" I smiled faintly, a bittersweet curve of my lips. It was a question that deserved an honest answer, especially coming from someone who had always treated me with respect and love. Because your Uncle Robert and I learned a long time ago that money changes people, I explained. My voice calm but carrying an unshakable authority. A few guests subtly edged closer, curiosity sparking in their eyes. We've seen families torn apart by inheritances, friendships destroyed by loans, children who see their parents as nothing more than walking ATMs. We chose to live simply to protect the relationships that truly mattered. Lucy nodded slowly, beginning to grasp the wisdom behind my choices. But Ethan, he was different before, she said, her voice trembling with pain. When we were kids, he would have defended anyone who hurt you. What happened to him? Her words carried the raw anguish of a sister watching her brother transform into someone unrecognizable. What happened to him was Juliet, I said softly, sadness in my tone but no trace of bitterness. What happened was greed disguised as love, ambition without values, and my own efforts to protect him, efforts that, in shielding him from consequences, deprived him of the chance to learn responsibility and integrity. My words hung in the ballroom, resonating through the stunned silence of the guests who had been listening intently. Carlos, who had remained respectfully to the side during our exchange, now approached and murmured in my ear, double quotes, Mrs. Hughes, the ballroom manager is approaching. It seems he has already been notified about the cancellation of the guaranteed payment. Indeed, I could see a burly man in a dark suit striding toward us, papers in hand, his face tight with concern. Double quotes, Mrs. Hughes, he said, his voice tense. I just received a highly irregular payment cancellation notice. The contract for this celebration is guaranteed until tomorrow morning. Can you explain what's happening? His presence injected an immediate, tangible reality into the chaos I had set in motion. Mr. Martinez, I replied, keeping my tone neutral, the financial guarantee I provided for this celebration has been revoked due to extraordinary circumstances that became clear tonight. I gestured toward Ethan and Juliet, frozen at the center of the ballroom, like statues of despair. Martinez's eyes scanned the scene, the experience of decades of event management showing in his steady demeanor. And who will now be responsible for payment? The total outstanding amount is $53,000, ballroom, food, music, flowers, photography. His voice was professional, but there was no mistaking the urgency. Ethan finally stepped forward, hesitating with each step. Mr. Martinez, there must be some misunderstanding. My mom, she can't just cancel the payment like that. We're family. This can be resolved. Desperation laced his voice. Desperation I had never heard before, the realization of the consequences finally sinking in. Young man, Martinez replied, his patience firm but tested. The financial guarantee was provided by Mrs. Hughes personally and privately. She has the legal right to withdraw it at any time. I now require an alternative form of payment immediately, or I will be forced to suspend the event. Juliet lurched forward, her wedding dress a wreck and her makeup smeared from tears. You can't do this, she shrieked, her voice cracking. It's our wedding day. You can't ruin our wedding over money. Her hysteria drew murmurs from the guests, discomfort rippling through the crowd. Ma'am, Martinez said, his tone growing firmer, I am not ruining anything. I am simply enforcing the contractual terms you agreed to. If an alternative payment is not provided immediately, I will have no choice but to suspend all services and ask the guests to leave. His words fell over the ballroom like a verdict. The reality of the situation finally began to sink in, not just for Juliet and Ethan, but for every guest who had been watching this drama unfold. Some guests had already begun gathering their bags, quietly heading toward the exits. Others remained transfixed by the spectacle unfolding before them, like witnesses to a car crash they couldn't look away from. Mom, Ethan said, stepping toward me with tears glistening in his eyes, the first time I had seen such vulnerability since he was a child. Please, I know what we did, W. His voice cracked on the last word, and for a fleeting moment I glimpsed the little boy I had raised, the son I once knew. Ethan, I said, my voice calm yet edged with steel, I am not destroying anything. You destroyed this the moment you chose greed over love, manipulation over honesty, and public humiliation over respect for your mother. Each word cut deep. But it was a wound that needed to be inflicted. Juliet, trembling and frantic, looked around at the guests slipping away. But what are we going to do? How are we going to explain this? How are we going to pay for all of it? Her panic betrayed the first real comprehension of the consequences of her actions. You're going to do what all responsible adults do, I said, my voice rising with authority. You will earn money honestly. You will live within your means. You will learn what it means to work hard for what you want instead of expecting others to provide it for you. Carlos approached quietly and murmured, Mrs. Hughes, the legal process is complete. All documents have been delivered. There is nothing more we can do here. His presence reminded MIT was time to leave them to face the consequences they had brought upon themselves. Lucy ran forward, wrapping me in a tight embrace. Aunt Aurora, I want you to know that you will always have my respect and my love, no matter what happens with Ethan. Her words hit me like a bomb for my wounded heart. And you will always have mine, Lucy, I whispered, returning the hug. Remember this night? Remember that character is measured not by what we own, but by how we treat those we love. Her tears soaked my shoulder as she nodded. Fully understanding the lesson unfolding before her, Martinez approached once more, his tone sharper now. Ladies and gentlemen, I need an immediate resolution. I cannot keep staff here indefinitely without a guarantee of payment. His professional patience was exhausted. Adding pressure to an already desperate scene, "You have my phone number," I said to Ethan and Juliet, looking them squarely in the eyes. When you are ready to have a real conversation about respect, values, and responsibility, when you have learned what it means to earn what you want, when you can face me and offer a genuine apology for what you did tonight, then we can talk. But until then, you will solve the mess you created entirely on your own. With that, I turned and walked toward the exit with Carlos, leaving behind a ballroom steeped in chaos, despair, and the weight of deserved consequences. 3 days later, my apartment had become a sanctuary of peace I hadn't felt in years. Joseph arrived every morning with coffee and pastries from the local bakery. Checking in on me after what he called the night Aurora reclaimed her dignity. His visits reminded me that I still had family who valued me for who I truly was. The phone had not stopped ringing for the past 3 days. Ethan had called 37 times, leaving messages that ranged from anger to desperate pleading. Juliet had sent 14 frantic text messages, each more hysterical than the last. Her parents had shown up at my door twice, demanding that I fix the mess I had caused, but I had stood my ground with a calmness that surprised even myself. That morning, Carlos arrived with news that, while expected, carried a weight that made my chest tighten. "Mrs. Hughes," he said as we sipped tea on my balcony, "I have received reports from all fronts. Ethan and Juliet were evicted from their apartment yesterday morning. The ballroom has initiated legal proceedings to recover the $53,000 owed. Their credit cards have been canceled for non-payment. And where are they living now?" I asked, though a part of me already knew the answer. With Juliet's parents, Carlos replied, "Apparently it's a 2-bedroom apartment where 3 people already live. The situation, it's tense," he added cautiously. His expression suggested that tense barely scratched the surface. That afternoon, while watering my plants on the balcony, I spotted a familiar car pull up in front of the building. It was Lucy, but she wasn't alone. With her was Amelia, my old friend from the real estate sector. And to my surprise, Joseph stepped out from the back seat. "Aura," Lucy called from the sidewalk. "We need to talk to you. There are things you need to know." When they entered my apartment, their faces were etched with urgency and concern, immediately putting me on high alert. "Aunt Aurora," Lucy began, settling onto my couch with a folder in hand that looked as official as the one Carlos had carried to the ballroom. "I've been investigating things since the wedding night, things I think you need to know before it's too late." "Too late for what?" I asked, pouring her some tea, my hands trembling slightly despite my effort to remain composed. Amelia cleared her throat, her voice steady but strained. "Aurora, over the last 3 days I've been digging into Ethan and Juliet's financial affairs. What I found goes far beyond what we imagined." She opened the folder, revealing documents that made my stomach churn. "They've been planning this for more than a year," Amelia continued. "Juliet consulted with lawyers specializing in senior mental competency cases. They had a detailed plan to declare you legally incompetent and take control of all your properties." Joseph, silent until then, leaned forward, his expression grave. "Aurora, there's more. That night, after you left the ballroom, I overheard Juliet on the phone. She was saying the old woman had ruined everything but that they still had Plan B." A shiver ran down my spine. "Plan B?" I repeated, my stomach twisting with a mix of fear and anger. Lucy squeezed my hand, her eyes wide with worry. "Aunt Aurora, they've been telling everyone you've gone senile. That scene at the wedding? They're framing it as proof that you've lost touch with reality. They're building a case to convince a judge that you can't manage your own affairs." The magnitude of their betrayal hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't enough that they had publicly humiliated me, schemed to steal my home, and conspired for months in secret. Now they were trying to weaponize my justified response as proof of my incompetence. The sheer audacity, the cruelty, was beyond anything I had imagined possible. "But that's not all," Amelia added, her voice trembling. "Juliet has been spreading rumors about your erratic behavior. She's visited neighbors, suggesting they report anything unusual they see." I felt breathless. The systematic nature of their defamation campaign, cutting deeper than I could have prepared for at that moment. Carlos returned for our scheduled meeting, and the tension in the apartment thickened further. "Mrs. Hughes," he said, his voice more serious than I had ever heard it. I see you've discovered some of the recent maneuvers. I have additional news that confirms what your friends have uncovered. Ethan filed a preliminary petition yesterday. He pulled documents from his folder, and my heart sank at the sight of them. The storm I had faced at the wedding had only just begun to reveal its full fury. He is requesting that a court evaluate your mental competency, Carlos explained, his tone measured. Based on what he calls irrational behavior and erratic financial decisions, he submitted sworn statements from several witnesses who were present at the wedding. Sworn statements? I asked, feeling anger begin to replace the initial shock. What kind of statements? Carlos leafed through his papers before answering. Statements describing your emotional outburst as unjustified and directed against an innocent young couple. Statements claiming your financial decisions are vengeful and destructive. Statements suggesting that you've lost the ability to make rational choices. Lucy squeezed my hand tightly. Aunt Aurora, they convinced several wedding guests to sign declarations. Most of them don't really understand what happened that night. All they saw was an older woman confronting newlyweds. Her voice trembled with the frustration of someone who had witnessed the truth, but felt powerless to change the narrative. But there is good news, Joseph said suddenly, a bright smile cutting through the tension. More people are on your side than they realize. He pulled out his phone and showed me a screen that left me momentarily speechless. Joseph, what is this? I asked, my eyes scanning the content a social media video with thousands of views. Remember how several guests recorded that night? He explained. Some of those videos have gone viral. People aren't seeing a senile old woman attacking a couple. They're seeing a dignified woman exposing years of manipulation and abuse. Amelia leaned closer. Aurora, the comments are overwhelmingly in your favor. People are praising your courage, your dignity under pressure, your refusal to let greed dictate family relationships. Some are even sharing their own stories of abuse. You've become a symbol of resistance against the exploitation of seniors. Carlos nodded, approval in his eyes. This public support will be invaluable if the case goes to court. It's hard to argue mental incompetence when thousands are applauding the logic and justice of your actions. His professional smile suggested the legal battle might not be as one-sided as I had feared. I stood, a new determination rising in me. But there's something else you need to know. If Ethan and Juliet want to turn this into a legal war, they're about to discover exactly who they're dealing with. I walked to my desk where I had spent the past 3 days compiling my own folder of documents. Every threat, every intimidating visit, every conspiratorial plan to strip me of my property. Even Juliet's slap-it was all documented. Photographs of my swollen cheek, medical records, legal evidence. If they wanted war, I would give them war, but on my terms, armed with truth and resources. And there's one more thing, I added, a smile breaking across my face, despite the gravity of the situation. I'm going to tell my story publicly. The whole story. The world will see exactly what happens when greed masquerades as family love. The room seemed to pulse with a new energy, the quiet confidence of people who knew justice was on their side. 6 months later, I sat in the studio of Stories of a Lifetime, the city's most watched program, waiting for an interview that would broadcast my story nationwide. After the wedding videos went viral and surpassed 2 million views, the producers had reached out to Carlos. My story had become a symbol of resistance, a testament to dignity, truth, and the courage to stand up to family abuse. The studio hummed with quiet activity as Catherine Diaz, a journalist renowned for her professionalism and integrity, reviewed her notes. Technicians adjusted lights, checked cameras, and finalized sound levels. Double quotes, Mrs. Hughes, Catherine said, turning to me with a warm smile. I want you to know that you've inspired thousands with your courage. We've received hundreds of letters from viewers who've experienced similar situations in the past 6 months. Much had changed. The legal case Ethan and Juliet had tried to build against me had collapsed spectacularly. Carlos had presented irrefutable evidence of their conspiracy to declare me incompetent. Not only had they lost, but the court had fined them for legal frivolity and ordered them to pay my attorney fees, $45,000 in total. Their downfall had been swift. Ethan lost his job after the scandal went public. Juliet's attempt at an image consulting business was ruined before it began, thanks to the viral videos of their public disgrace. They were now confined to a modest 1-bedroom apartment in the suburbs, juggling part-time jobs, and struggling to pay off mounting debts. We're live in 5 minutes, the program director announced. I looked at the cameras, soon to broadcast my story to millions. Beside me stood Carlos, ready to clarify the legal details. In the audience were Joseph, Lucy, Emilio, the people who had been my anchor through these tumultuous months. The hardest part of these 6 months had been Ethan's silence. No calls, no letters, no acknowledgement of his wrongdoing. It was as though he had chosen hatred over accountability. Juliet, in contrast, had tried repeatedly to reach me. Her messages shifted from threats to desperate pleas for financial assistance. The last one, just 2 weeks prior, cut through me. Aurora, I know we made mistakes, but we're family. Ethan is sick with stress, and I'm pregnant. Please, you can't let your grandchild grow up in poverty. A dagger to my heart. I was about to be a grandmother, yet my grandchild would enter a world shadowed by resentment toward me. I had learned the most painful truth of all. I couldn't save those who didn't want to be saved. Attempting to do so only perpetuated destruction. Mrs. Hughes will start in 30 seconds, Catherine said softly. I inhaled deeply, thinking of the letters I had received from seniors, parents, and grandparents, sharing stories of abuse, financial control, and emotional manipulation. We are live in 3, 2, 1. The red light on the camera blinked on. Catherine's voice, calm and confident, filled the studio. Good evening and welcome to Stories of a Lifetime. I am Catherine Diaz. Tonight we have with us Aurora Hughes, a 68-year-old woman whose story has shocked the nation and brought the issue of family abuse against seniors to the forefront of public debate. Mrs. Hughes, 6 months after the events at your son's wedding, how does it feel to know that your story has inspired so many people? Her question was precise, compassionate, and gave me space to speak my truth. I feel grateful, I replied, my voice steadying as I spoke. Grateful that something as painful as losing my relationship with my son has been able to help others in similar situations. For months, I felt lonely and uncertain, wondering if I had been wrong. Now I know what I experienced is far more common than we realize. Catherine nodded, consulting her notes. Tell us about the years leading up to that night, when you first started to realize that something wasn't right in your relationship with your son and his fiancée. It was the question I had been waiting for. The moment to explain how emotional and financial abuse often creeps in slowly, almost imperceptibly. It started with small things. I began remembering the early signs I had once ignored out of love, the offhand comments about my age, the suggestions that I could no longer manage on my own, the subtle pressures to make decisions that served their interests instead of mine. Family abuse rarely begins with shouting or blows. It begins with the quiet erosion of your confidence, with making you doubt your own reality. Carlos leaned forward, adding context. What Aurora describes is a classic pattern in elder abuse cases. Family members often use psychological manipulation long before moving on to direct coercion. It's insidious because it's disguised as care and concern. In the moment of revelation, Catherine asked gently, when did you decide to finally expose the truth about your finances? I took a deep breath. The slap, I said simply. When Juliet slapped me in the ballroom in front of 130 people because I refused to hand over the keys to my apartment. In that instant, I realized this was no longer about protecting my family from the consequences of their actions. It was about protecting myself from further abuse. The interview flowed for 45 minutes. I spoke of my decision to live simply to protect our privacy, the years of secret financial support I had provided, the conspiracy to declare me incompetent, and the legal battle that followed. Each answer was not just my story, it was a lesson, a warning, and a guide for anyone facing similar circumstances. Near the end, Catherine asked the question I had dreaded yet secretly hoped for. Mrs. Hughes, do you have a message for your son if he is watching this tonight? I looked directly into the camera, imagining Ethan on the other side. Ethan, if you are listening, I want you to know that I still love you. I will always love you because you are my son. But loving someone does not mean allowing them to abuse you. It does not mean sacrificing your dignity for their convenience, or becoming a victim of their greed. The doors to my heart will always be open for you, I continued, tears beginning to well, but only if you walk through them as the honorable man I tried to raise you to be. Only if you can look me in the eye, take full responsibility for your actions, and show that you understand family is built on love and respect, not opportunism and manipulation. Turning to the wider audience, I added, and for anyone watching who recognizes their own story and mine, know this: you have the right to be treated with dignity at any age. You have the right to make your own choices about your money, your home, your life. You have the right to set boundaries with family members who treat you poorly, and you have the right to seek help when those boundaries are violated. When the cameras went off, the studio erupted with applause. Catherine hugged me, tears in her eyes. Aurora, that was one of the most powerful interviews I've ever conducted. It's going to change lives. Carlos nodded beside me, pride clear in his expression. We had achieved more than a legal victory. We had given courage and hope to countless others that night. Driving home with Joseph, Lucy, and Amelia, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I had told my story. I had defended my truth, and I had transformed my pain into a beacon for others. No matter what the future held with Ethan, I knew I had done the right thing. Aurora, Lucy said from the back seat, her voice full of admiration, I am so proud of you. You've turned the worst experience of your life into something that will protect thousands of people." Her words resonated in my heart as we arrived home. The apartment that Juliet had once coveted now truly felt like a sanctuary, not because I had won a legal battle, but because I had finally learned to value myself enough to demand the respect I deserved. I had discovered that sometimes the only way to save a relationship is to be willing to lose it. As I prepared for bed that night, I understood that I had set the most important example of my life, that it is never too late to stand up for yourself, that you are never too old to demand dignity, and that true love sometimes requires the most difficult decisions. My story had ended, but my life was just beginning again. 2 years have passed since that night that divided my life into a before and after. As I sit on the same balcony where I once watered my plants and reflected on the silent humiliations I thought I had to endure out of a mother's love, the world feels different. The difference lies in the courage. To put a price on your dignity, my mornings now begin as they have for the past 18 months. With a call from Carmen, the coordinator of the Aurora Hughes Foundation for the Protection of Seniors, I decided to use my name for the charitable organization I founded with part of my redirected inheritance, Aurora. "We have 23 new cases this week," Carmen informed me, her voice carrying that mix of determination and sorrow familiar to those of us who work in this field. All similar patterns: adult children pressuring older parents for property or money. Every case is like looking into a mirror of the past. Yesterday, I reviewed the file of a 72-year-old woman whose daughter convinced her to sell her house for her own good, only for the money to fund a failed business and a European vacation. The day before, a 69-year-old man was emotionally blackmailed by his twins. "If you don't lend us $50,000, you will never see your grandchildren again." The irony is not lost on me. I have transformed my worst personal experience into my life's most meaningful purpose. The foundation has helped more than 400 seniors regain control over their finances, their homes, and most importantly, we have specialized lawyers, social workers, psychologists, and a support system I wish I had when I felt so isolated and confused. Joseph remains my dearest neighbor and now serves as the foundation's vice president. At 72, he has found renewed energy in giving lectures on detecting family manipulation. "Aurora," he told me last week, reviewing new cases. "I never thought my golden years would include becoming a detective for dysfunctional families, but it's the best adventure I've ever had." Lucy moved into the apartment next door a year ago. Following her divorce from a brief 8-month marriage, she wanted to be close to the bravest person she knows. Working as the foundation's educational director has given her a purpose she never found in her traditional teaching career. "Aunt Aurora," she often tells me, "you taught me that sometimes real family doesn't come from blood but from those who choose to respect you unconditionally." The success of my public story brought unexpected consequences. The book I wrote with the help of an investigative journalist, When Love Hurts, An Elderly Woman Fights Back, became a national bestseller, selling more than 200,000 copies. All royalties go directly to the foundation. The letters I receive from readers are living testimonies that my experience has resonated with thousands of homes where silence had once been the norm. Carlos is still my financial advisor, but now he also serves as the foundation's principal accountant. His experience navigating the legal aftermath of my confrontation with Ethan has become invaluable in helping others in similar situations. Mrs. Hughes, Carlos said during our monthly meeting, "We have recovered more than $3 million in properties and savings that abusive family." Members had tried to take the question I hear most, often the one that comes up in every interview and conversation, is whether I miss Ethan. The answer is complex and painful. I miss the child he was, the young man who showed flashes of kindness and honor. I miss the illusion of the family I thought we had, but I do not miss the last few years of manipulation, emotional blackmail, and systematic disrespect. In these 2 years, Ethan has contacted me exactly 3 times. The first was 6 months after the television interview, when apparently some coworkers saw the show and began treating him differently. The second was 14 months ago when his son, my grandson Oliver, was born. The third was 3 months ago, after Juliet left him, taking the baby and half of their meager possessions. Each time his calls were for financial help, never for a genuine apology or acknowledgement of the harm he caused. His thinking remains the same. The world wrongs him, never his decisions. The last call lasted less than 5 minutes. He ended with, "Mom, your pride is more important than your grandson." I replied calmly. With clarity, I didn't know I still had Ethan. My dignity is exactly as important as my grandson, and I hope one day he learns that lesson better than you did. It was the first time I had ever hung up on my son, and it was strangely liberating. Oliver, my 14-month-old grandson, is the only one who can still bring tears to my eyes. He doesn't know me. When Juliet left, she took all the family photographs, including the few I had of him. I created a trust fund for his college education, administered by Carlos, to be available when he turns 18, regardless of the state of our relationship. Perhaps, Amelia often tells me during our weekly dinners, when Oliver is older, he will seek his own answers and find the courage to know his grandmother for himself. Amelia has become my closest confidant, especially since she herself had to set boundaries with toxic family members a decade ago. These past 2 years have shown me how much my physical and mental health have improved. Chronic insomnia, headaches, and anxiety that once kept me in constant alertness have vanished. My doctor tells me my stress levels are those of a woman 10 years younger, Aurora. Dr. Hernandez said at my last checkup, "It's remarkable how the body responds when toxic stress is removed. Your blood pressure is perfect. Your sleep is restorative. Your posture has improved." He was right. I walk more upright. My voice is firmer. My hands no longer tremble when making decisions. The flower shop I once worked at closed a year ago, but I've found a new passion in the community garden I helped establish. I teach other older residents about medicinal plants and organic growing, techniques, a connection to the earth and to people who value accumulated wisdom rather than see it as obsolete. My routine now includes 3 days a week at the foundation offices, 2 days visiting seniors who need emotional support, and weekends dedicated to writing my second book. This one will focus on practical strategies for detecting and preventing family financial abuse. The apartment that was once a source of greed is now a space of peace and creativity. Ethan's old room has been transformed into my office, where I meet people seeking guidance. The walls display thank you letters, photos of families helped to reconcile healthily, and diplomas from universities where I've lectured. Mentoring older women has been one of the most rewarding experiences. Margaret, 74, came to the foundation 6 months ago after her son sold her car without permission to pay off gambling debts. After 3 months of guidance, she sent me a photo last week of herself smiling in her new car, purchased with her recovered savings. "Aurora," Margaret wrote, "you taught me that setting boundaries is not cruelty, it's survival. You taught me self-love is not selfishness, it's necessary. You taught me it's never too late to stand up for myself." Her words reminded me why all the pain was worth it. Reflecting on these 2 years, I realize my story does not have the traditional happy ending of family reconciliation, but it has something better: authenticity, reclaimed dignity, and a purpose that transcends personal pain. I've learned that the greatest demonstration of self-love is walking away from those who insist on hurting you. If I could speak to the Aurora who walked into that wedding ballroom 2 years ago, I would say, have courage. It will be painful, but on the other side awaits a life more authentic than you ever imagined. Peace awaits, the peace of knowing you will never again allow anyone to treat you as disposable. Tonight, as I finish writing these reflections, I look to the future with renewed hope. Tomorrow, I meet with senators to discuss legislation to protect seniors. Next week, I inaugurate the Foundation's 3rd Regional Center. Next month, I begin a national documentary series at 70. My life is richer, more meaningful, and more authentic than it was at 68. I have learned that ending a toxic relationship is not a loss, it's liberation. I have discovered that true family is as much chosen as inherited. And I have proven that it is never too late to write a new chapter in your story. When people ask if I regret that night, my answer is always the same: no. Did you like my story? Which city are you listening from? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you want to support my work, you can send a super thanks, so I can continue sharing these stories. Thank you for your support.